Welcome to Hard Script.
She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather. We were standing near the bar at a charity opening downtown, surrounded by glass, laughter, and people who pretended not to listen while catching every word. She leaned slightly away from me, her phone lighting up again in her hand, and told me I was begging for affection. Not even annoyed. Amused. As if I had misunderstood my place. I didn't answer. I didn't smile either. I just went quiet, the way I do when a calculation no longer adds up. My wife, Lauren, was in her element that evening. Compliments stuck to her like perfume. She had styled half the room, or at least made sure everyone knew she had. Her private Telegram channel for VIP clients had turned into a second career, one built on late nights, urgent messages, and men who paid to be heard. One of them was there too. Daniel Reed. Everyone knew him. Restaurant guy. Confident. Loud enough to be noticed without raising his voice. He didn't look at me when he spoke to her, but he didn't need to. I watched how she angled her body toward him. How her laugh came faster, sharper. How her hand stayed face down on the bar when messages came in, screen hidden. When she introduced me, it was rushed. My name, no title, no context. Like a detail that slowed the story. Someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, she filled the silence with a joke about how I liked things stable and boring. Bridges. Spreadsheets. Long timelines. The group laughed politely. Daniel smiled like he'd already bought something valuable. Later, when I mentioned we hadn't really talked in weeks, she exhaled through her nose and told me to stop begging for attention. She said it quietly, but the words landed hard enough to tilt the room. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I nodded once, as if she had just clarified a rule I'd been following wrong. That night, she stayed out after I left. I went home alone, loosened my tie, and opened my laptop. Not to check her messages. Not yet. I started drafting a document. Just a framework. Clean. Neutral. The kind you build when you know the structure is going to change, and you want it to hold when weight is removed. The next morning, Lauren moved through the kitchen like nothing had shifted. She was already dressed for a client session, phone propped against the coffee machine, voice soft and attentive as she discussed color palettes and after-hours fitting options. She didn't lower her tone when I walked in. If anything, it became more polished. I poured coffee and watched her reflection in the microwave door. She smiled at something on her screen. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. A private one. Later that week, Daniel's name appeared more often. Not on her lock screen. She had fixed that, but in small slips. A reservation she needed to review. A menu tasting she had to consult on. A last-minute trip to another city for fabric sourcing, sponsored by one of her top clients. She said it casually, as if travel with another man was just an extension of her job. I did not accuse her. I asked one question. I told her it felt like we were living on different schedules, different planets. She didn't look up from her messages when she responded. She said I was overthinking. She said ambitious people required flexibility. She said I should be proud she was in demand. That afternoon, a third voice entered the room without realizing it. Her assistant, Chloe, called while Lauren was in the shower. The phone buzzed across the counter. The preview flashed before the screen dimmed. Chloe had typed that Daniel wanted confirmation for the suite. She added a winking emoji and mentioned how generous he'd been after the last private styling. When Lauren came out, I handed her the phone without comment. She saw my face. I saw hers tighten for half a second before she smoothed it over. She said it was business. She said high-profile clients expected discretion. She said I needed to stop acting insecure. I nodded again. No raised voice. No scene. That evening, while she packed for her sourcing trip, I logged into our joint banking account. I was not looking for hotel charges. I was studying patterns. Transfers labeled as reimbursements. Restaurant payments that didn't match any city she claimed to be in. Quiet upgrades. I did not confront her before she left. Instead, I waited for the receipts to finish telling their story. She left in the morning with a structured suitcase and a kiss that landed somewhere near my cheek. She said she would be busy, that the client meetings would run late, that sourcing trips were never predictable. I told her to travel safe. My voice sounded steady, even to me. When the door closed, the apartment felt larger, quieter. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and our shared accounts on the screen. The transfers formed a pattern that didn't need interpretation. reimbursements from Daniel's company that covered more than fabric samples, charges from a boutique hotel in the city she claimed she was just passing through, a dinner at one of his own restaurants, comped publicly, then recharged privately through a different account. In the afternoon, I checked her Telegram channel, not by breaking into it. I had helped her set up the payment gateway months ago when she said she needed someone who understood contracts. The backend still routed summaries to an email address we shared for tax purposes. The messages were encrypted, but subject lines weren't. Late-night styling consultations, private wardrobe previews, after-hours fittings. That evening, a photo surfaced on social media. Daniel posted a group shot from a supplier dinner. Lauren stood beside him, closer than necessary. Her hand rested lightly against his jacket. Not intimate, just familiar. I zoomed in, not to see their faces, to see the reflection in the glass behind them. The angle caught a table set for two, not a group. She called later and described the city lights outside her hotel. She said she was exhausted. She said she missed home. Her tone was warm, practiced. I listened and let her finish. After we hung up, I opened the draft document I had started the night of the charity event. I renamed it. Not divorce. Not separation. Operational reset. I began outlining new terms. Separate accounts. Shared expenses itemized. Rent converted to a formal co-tenant agreement. Household responsibilities divided in writing. I did not write a single accusation. I adjusted the structure, the way I would if a bridge had developed stress fractures. You do not argue with steel. You redistribute weight. Before going to bed, I transferred my salary into a new account under my name only. I did not text her to tell her. She came back 2 days later with new shoes and a softer tone. She moved around the apartment as if testing the air, expecting tension, maybe a confrontation. I met her at the door, took her suitcase, and asked if the trip had been productive. She said it had been incredible. She said Daniel had introduced her to suppliers who could elevate her brand overnight. I told her that was good for business. That evening, I placed a printed folder on the kitchen counter. Not dramatic. No raised voice. I said I had reviewed our finances and wanted to formalize a few things to make life simpler for both of us. I spoke the way I would at a project meeting, outlining scope and responsibilities. She opened the folder halfway and frowned. I explained that from now on our incomes would remain separate. Shared expenses would be divided evenly and transferred monthly. The lease would be updated to reflect us as co-tenants, not a single financial unit. Household duties would rotate, documented in a shared calendar. Social events would be optional, not assumed. She laughed at first. She said I was being extreme. She said marriage was not a business contract. She asked if this was about my feelings again. I told her it was about clarity. She accused me of punishing her for being successful. I did not respond to the accusation. I only pointed out that clarity protects both sides. If her work required late nights and travel, this structure would prevent misunderstandings. She signed nothing that night, but she did not refuse either. She left the folder on the counter and went to shower. Her phone lit up on the couch. Daniel's name appeared, followed by a message about missing their quiet night. I did not open it. I did not need to. Over the next week, I withdrew from everything that had once defined us. I stopped initiating conversation. I stopped reaching for her in bed. When invitations came for dinners or tastings at Daniel's restaurants, I declined politely and wished her a good evening. In public, I was calm. In private, I was absent. 2 weeks into this new arrangement, she stood in the hallway and asked when I was coming home. I told her I lived there. I had just stopped participating. After I told her I had stopped participating, something in her posture shifted. Not guilt. Not apology. Confusion. She was used to reaction. Used to managing emotion like a room she had styled herself. My silence gave her nothing to adjust. Daniel did not like that either. A few days later, his name appeared in the local business section. Not for a new opening, but for an internal audit at one of his flagship restaurants. Anonymous complaints about supplier favoritism and off-the-books incentives. The article did not accuse him directly, but it mentioned discrepancies tied to private vendor relationships. I had not written the article. I had not contacted the journalist. I had, however, forwarded a publicly available compliance guideline to a regulatory email address after noticing that certain reimbursements aligned too neatly with Lauren's trips. I did not attach names. I attached patterns. When Lauren read the article at breakfast, she went still. She said Daniel had competitors who were jealous. She said people at his level were always under scrutiny. Her phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. She ignored the first few messages, then finally picked it up and stepped into the bedroom. Her voice carried through the door, calm at first, then sharper. She said she could not be dragged into anything messy. She said her brand relied on discretion. She said she had not signed up to be collateral damage. That evening, she canceled a planned tasting event and told her followers she was focusing on select projects only. The Telegram channel went quiet for the first time in months. I did not ask questions. I updated the lease with the property manager, who had no issue converting us to formal co-tenants. I transferred my share of the next month's rent directly from my new account. I removed my name from her business utility line and set up separate billing for my office equipment. At dinner, she tried to talk about neutral things. A new fabric shipment. A potential collaboration in another city. I listened without leaning in. By the end of the week, Daniel's messages became shorter, less frequent. When she mentioned needing clarity about where they stood, he responded that he did not have time for complicated situations. For the first time since this started, she stayed home on a Friday evening. I was in the living room, reviewing bridge schematics, when she stood in the doorway and watched me as if I were the one who had become unfamiliar. The quiet started spreading beyond our apartment. Lauren's mother called one evening, her voice edged with concern. She had heard from a mutual friend that Lauren had pulled out of 2 high-profile events connected to Daniel's restaurants. She asked if everything was stable at home. Lauren answered that we were fine, just busy. Her eyes stayed on me while she said it, as if daring me to contradict her. I did not. A few days later, we attended a small gathering at her friend Megan's place. It was the first social event I had agreed to since restructuring our lives. I arrived separately and left my car on the street instead of using valet, something Lauren noticed but did not comment on. The room shifted when we walked in together but did not stand close. Conversations lowered, then resumed. Daniel was not there, but his name moved through the air anyway. Someone mentioned the audit again, casually, as if discussing weather. Megan's husband joked that high-flying restaurateurs sometimes forgot paperwork mattered. Lauren laughed too loudly. She said people loved to exaggerate. At one point, Megan pulled her aside. I did not follow, but their voices carried. Megan asked whether mixing business with certain clients was worth the risk. She did not say Daniel's name. She did not need to. When Lauren came back, her expression had hardened. She stood next to me, closer than she had in weeks, but it felt staged. A display. On the drive home, she asked why I had been so distant in front of everyone. She said couples were supposed to present unity. She said my detachment made things look worse than they were. I told her that unity required participation from both sides. The next morning, her Telegram channel lost several subscribers. Not many, but enough for her to notice. She refreshed the numbers more than once, as if it were a glitch. Daniel's social media shifted as well. New photos. Different stylists credited. No mention of her. By evening, Lauren sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone, waiting for a message that did not come. I was across from her, reviewing a structural report, fully present in the room and entirely out of reach. She tried to re-establish small routines first. One evening, she cooked dinner. Not for social media, not for a client story, just for us. She placed the plates carefully, lit a candle, and sat across from me as if we were rehearsing something we used to do without effort. She asked about my latest project, about the river span I had mentioned weeks ago. Her questions were precise, almost studied. I answered politely. I described soil reports and load tolerances, the way wind affected long-term stability. I did not shorten my explanations for her. I did not soften them either. When I finished, I thanked her for dinner and cleared my plate. She watched me as if waiting for something else. An invitation. A touch. I gave her neither. Later that night, her phone lit up again. This time the message was short. Daniel wrote that he needed to focus on protecting his businesses and could not afford personal distractions. He wished her the best. No anger. No drama. Just distance. She read it twice. Her shoulders lowered in a way I had not seen before. She did not cry. She did not throw the phone. She simply placed it face down and stared at the ceiling. The following days, she stayed home more often. Her assistant Chloe sent messages asking about upcoming collaborations. Lauren replied that she was reevaluating her client list. Sponsors who once rushed to be featured now asked for clearer timelines. The word complicated appeared more than once in her inbox. She approached me in the hallway one morning and asked if we could talk. Not about finances. About us. I told her we already had a structure in place. If she wanted to amend it, she could propose changes in writing. She looked at me as if I had become someone else. She said she missed how I used to look at her. She said the apartment felt colder. I adjusted my jacket and told her temperature was subjective. That afternoon, she posted a photo of us from a year ago on her social media, calling it throwback to steadier days. The comments filled with heart emojis and questions about how lucky she was. I did not repost it. I did not acknowledge it. By evening, she deleted the picture. For the first time, the silence in the apartment was not coming from me. The confrontation did not come as an explosion. It came as a request. One evening, she asked me to sit down with her at the dining table. No candles this time. No performance. Just two chairs facing each other and a phone turned off between us, as if she wanted to prove something by silencing it. She said she felt like she was living with a landlord, not a husband. She said the paperwork, the separate accounts, the calendar of responsibilities had turned our marriage into a transaction. She admitted that things with Daniel had crossed lines. She called it a mistake that grew from ambition and attention. She insisted it had not meant what I thought it meant. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, she waited for anger, for accusations, for a list of details I had uncovered. I gave her none. I told her the structure reflected reality, that we had already been operating separately, just without clarity. I said that if she wanted something different, it would require different behavior over time, not explanations in one conversation. She leaned forward and asked if I still loved her. The question hung there, heavy and exposed. I did not answer it directly. I told her love without respect erodes under pressure. I said I had stopped asking for attention because I was done negotiating for it. Her eyes filled, but she held steady. She said she had misread my stability as indifference. She said Daniel had felt exciting because he reacted quickly, because he mirrored her energy. She admitted that when things became complicated, he had stepped back without hesitation. For a moment, the room felt smaller. She reached across the table, not dramatically, just a simple gesture. I stood up before her hand reached mine. I told her that proximity did not equal participation. That night, she slept in our bed. I moved to the guest room, not as a punishment, but as a continuation of the terms already set. The next morning, she sent me a message from the kitchen even though we were under the same roof. She wrote that she was willing to start over if I was. I read it, locked my phone, and left for work without replying. The crash did not look dramatic from the outside. No shouting. No slammed doors. It looked like absence. Daniel's audit deepened. 2 locations closed temporarily for renovations. Investors began asking questions in comment sections that used to be filled with praise. His public tone shifted from confident to carefully neutral. Lauren watched it all unfold on her screen, refreshing feeds as if she could reverse momentum through observation alone. Her own brand thinned quietly. A collaboration she had hinted at for months announced a different stylist. Chloe sent a message saying several VIP subscribers had paused their memberships, citing uncertainty. Lauren did not argue. She replied that she understood and would circle back. At home, she moved slower. The apartment that once felt like a launch pad now felt like a waiting room. She stopped dressing for effect when she was not leaving the house. She began cooking more often, not as a show, but because it filled time. One evening, I found her sitting on the floor of the bedroom closet, surrounded by garment bags and shoeboxes. She was holding a dress she had worn to that first charity event, the night she told me to stop begging for attention. She ran her fingers along the fabric as if trying to remember the version of herself who had felt untouchable in it. She did not notice me at first. When she did not stand up. She said she had confused admiration with loyalty. She said she thought success insulated her from consequences. She admitted that when Daniel realized she would not file for divorce immediately, he recalculated and stepped away. I did not step into the closet. I stayed in the doorway. She asked if I was planning to leave. Not angrily, quietly. I told her I had already left the version of us that required me to compete for space in my own marriage. That night, she slept without closing the bedroom door. Not to invite me in, but because the silence felt heavier when it was sealed. I stayed in the guest room, reviewing final notes on a bridge project that was about to move into construction. Outside our windows, nothing had collapsed. Inside, everything had shifted. The final moment did not arrive with a deadline. It arrived with stillness. One evening, Lauren asked if we could review the document again. The same folder that had once made her laugh now lay open on the table, edges worn from being handled too many times. She had added notes in the margins. Not objections. Adjustments. She said she was ready to operate under clear terms if that was the only way forward. She said she would close the private Telegram channel and rebuild her business without blurred lines. She said she understood that trust would not return because she wanted it to. I listened without interrupting. She did not blame Daniel. She did not blame ambition. She said she had mistaken my steadiness for something that would always be there, no matter how she treated it. She admitted that when attention came easily from someone louder, she followed it. When it became inconvenient, it disappeared. The apartment was quiet, but it did not feel hostile. Just exposed. I told her I was not interested in punishment. I was interested in alignment. If she wanted to stay, it would be under the framework we had established. Separate finances. Transparent schedules. No shared appearances unless they were earned, not staged. Respect demonstrated consistently, not declared once. She nodded. Not dramatically. Deliberately. She asked if I was staying because it was easier than leaving. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had not paused for any of this. I told her I was staying because I chose to, not because I needed to. I said I had already proven to myself that I could detach without collapsing. I picked up my jacket and headed toward the door for an evening walk. She asked where I was going. I told her I lived here. I just no longer showed up where I was not respected. I left the apartment quietly, not to disappear, but to remind her that my presence was no longer automatic.